Steve, thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. Bad stats and fake news. Well, I'm going to underscore some of the points that Steve made. I hope in the next 10 or 15 minutes, I'm going to give you good reasons to be wary, but also good reasons to be optimistic. I hate the term fake news. I don't really know where it's come from. I mean, let's just call it lies or untruths. It's not fake news, it's things that aren't true. And I want to give you a few reasons to question some of the present memes, accepted norms, and accepted facts that are bandied around in contemporary political and economic debate today, and invite you to query whether or not they are true. Because I am worried that there are a good number of arguments and debates and discussions that we have in the public arena that are simply based on false premises. And I want to introduce you to that is the great late Swedish statistician Hans Rosling. He was the great exposer of fake news and was seriously concerned that people were reaching conclusions about politics and the world around them based on false premises. And he did quite a bit of opinion polling to go and see what people believed and what they thought. And here was one of the questions that he asked. How many children do women in Bangladesh have on average? 4 options. Is it an average of 2.5, 3.5, 4.5, or 5.5? What's the sense in the room? 3.5? 3.5? Anybody think 5.5? No? 3.5 is your answer, okay. The answer is 2.5. And if you asked the British population, it's straight multiple choice, so you've got a reasonable chance of getting it right if you just gamble. The wider British population, only 12% of British people got that right. More worrying still, only 10% of British graduates got it right. So I have no idea what they are teaching you at university, but it makes you 2% more stupid than the average British population. And of course, because it's a straight multiple choice question, if you actually just asked a chimpanzee to randomly hit a number, chimpanzees would have got a 25% score of getting it right. Measurably better than the British population and enormously better than British graduates. It's not necessarily something that you come across in your day-to-day lives that you need to know exactly what the fertility rate in Bangladesh is, but I think that's an interesting sign that people make erroneous assumptions about the world around them, and that the better educated are not necessarily the better informed. Here is another question that Hans Rosling put forward. What percentage of the world's population is literate? 20, 40, 60, or 80%? Guess in the room? 60? Well, those who shouted out 80, you are right. 80% of the world's population is literate. When Hans Rosling surveyed the British population, that is the proportion of the British population who got it right, 8%. Even more worrying still, only 4% of British graduates got it right. And once again, the chimpanzees, if guessing at random, 25% of them will get it right, 6 times as accurate. So those are just sort of 2 facts about the world. There's nothing controversial about them. They are matters of record in which, staggeringly, the British population are less likely to get the right answer than a chimpanzee, and the British population that have been to university are less likely to get it right than people who haven't. And why does this matter? Well, I think that when we are looking at the world around us and considering problems, solutions, or how to improve things, it is very, very problematic if we are starting from the wrong baseline and the wrong premise. Only 8% of people in the United States and Europe believe the statement poverty has fallen during the past 20 years. 8% only believe that. But it has fallen miraculously in the past 20 years. Global poverty, on the measurement I'm using, is those living on less than $1.90 a day, dropped to a little less than 10% of the world's population in 2015, 9.6%. The lowest level ever. And 30 years ago, when I would have been about the age that you guys are in the room, that level of poverty was at 40%. 40% of the world's population living in absolute poverty. That has gone down to 10%. We've seen an increase generally across the world in economic freedom. We've even seen at the top end, put aside the poorer parts of the world, huge increases in average wealth. The percentage of people with access to clean water, for example, was about 76% in 1990, and that is now at 91% today, a measurable and vast improvement. Take the most populous country on the planet, China. China's GDP has not only increased since the era of Mao Zedong, it has increased 55-fold, Chinese GDP. Back under Mao, about 90% of Chinese lived in absolute poverty. That has now fallen to under 10% today. India, one of the other largest countries in the world, GDP has more than tripled in real terms since 1991. There are huge and vast improvements, but we don't seem to be aware of them. We seem to want to believe the bad news, not the good news. These are, as I say, matters of fact. And to give you an indication of just how much, and to echo Steve's opening points about prosperity and reasons to be optimistic rather than depressed, I'm going to show you just a minute or so of a video from Hans Rosling showing you just how much the world has improved. And he manages to show this, I think, extremely elegantly and graphically in just about a minute.
Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to give you my all-time favorite graph. I'm going to show you the history of 200 countries during 200 years in less than 1 minute. I have an axis for income. I have an axis for lifespan. I start in 1800, and there are all the countries. And back in 1800, everyone was down in the poor and sick corner. Can you see? Low lifespan, little money. And here comes the effect of the Industrial Revolution. Of course, the countries in West Europe, they are coming to better wealth, but they are not getting much healthier in the beginning. And those under colonial domination doesn't benefit anything in there. They remain there in the sick and poor corner. And now health is improving, health is slowly improving here. It's getting up here, and we are coming into the new century and the terrible First World War, and then the economic recession after that, and then the Second World War. Oof. And now, independence. And with independence, health is improving faster than it ever did in other countries here. And now starts the fast economic catch-up of China and other Latin American countries. They come on here, you know, and India is following there, and the African countries is also following. It's an amazing change that had happened in the world.
So things have improved enormously, radically. What Rosling shows there, the different colours represent different continents, and the size of the individual bubble represents the population of that country. A colossal, amazing achievement and growth. Lots of reasons to be cheerful. This doesn't mean there are no problems in the world. It doesn't mean that there is nothing that we need to fix. It doesn't mean that we should be complacent. But it does mean that there are reasons to be extremely optimistic about the improvement in human life, human prosperity and human happiness over the last 200 years, and no reason at all to believe that that's going to go into reverse. But we still just seem to not believe it. More than half of British people believe that the rich have gotten richer and the poor have gotten poorer. More than half of people believe that statement. I'm going to prove to you that that is a complete misnomer in just 1 minute. The rich are getting richer. Real disposable incomes have doubled, but the poor are getting richer too. Everybody is in fact improving. This was about Britain, not specifically about the wider world, but the rich are getting richer and the poor are getting richer. But we just don't seem to believe it. We seem to believe that the poor are getting poorer. It's not true. This graph here shows, this is more or less over my lifetime. I would have been 5 years old when this graph starts in 1977. This shows splitting the population of Britain into 5 different sections. The richest 20%, the next 20%, right the way down to the poorest 20%. And if you look at what each of those are measured at 1 in 1977, of course they weren't all earning the same amount, but using that as the baseline, that is how salaries, incomes have improved for each of those quintiles. Yeah, sure, the rich have done very, very well, but the poor have done pretty well too. It finishes just after the economic crash, so you do see a slight downward dip around the time of the economic crash, but every single quintile, whether you are in the poorest 20% or the richest 20%, in terms of your incomes in the United Kingdom, every single quintile has improved substantially over the course of my lifetime. I mean, up by a factor of about 2.5. Everybody is about 2.5 times richer than they were back in 1977. Huge gains. The rich are richer and the poor are getting much, much richer too. But we don't seem to want to believe that. We're also worried, this is, I was actually going to look through some sort of newspaper headlines and commentary about it. There's so much out there, just Google it, about inequality. Most people believe inequality is an increasing problem, getting far worse, that we've never been a less equal society than we are today. Again, it is simply not true. This is the measure, the standard measure of inequality, the Gini coefficient, essentially a comparison between the people at the top and the people at the bottom. And it is true that back in the 1970s, this graph also starts at 1977, the world was a bit more equal as a place, or Britain was a bit more equal as a place, and inequality actually increased somewhat until about 1991. But since then, since 1991, more or less flatlined actually, zigs up and down a little bit, but no major change, not an acceleration in inequality. Pretty much it has been static over the past 25 or so years. Again, people appear to just not wish to believe this, to believe that the rich are getting much richer, the poor are getting much poorer, and inequality is increasing, and it simply ain't so. Inequality is pretty much flat. In fact, if you want to dramatically make the world a better place, what you really want to happen is many more financial crashes. In 2008, with the financial crash, although everybody got poorer, it was the richer segment who took the bigger hit. But across, as I say, your lifetimes, essentially, I'm guessing most of you were born in the 1990s, no change at all on inequality. Nothing to write home about. And if inequality is your big concern, nothing much to worry about. You wouldn't believe this if you watch the news, read the newspapers, or listen to politicians who all seem to think that things are getting worse. So I'm worried that people are taught prejudices rather than facts, or are perhaps taught facts which have got substantially out of date, that the textbooks might not be being updated rapidly enough or swiftly enough. As I say, inequality did grow in the 1980s, but it is now down to its lowest level since 1985. I don't think that you would know that by reading the newspapers or watching television. So my message to you is a very simple one. Be wary about what you hear. Question everybody, including the speakers that you will hear from today. Do not assume that what you hear presented to you is automatically true. Do not fall for myths. And today, at this conference, that's a good quote, I think, from Oxford University's Vice-Chancellor, education is not meant to be comfortable. I hope that today you will learn about some alternative views. I hope that you will learn some facts. Don't take any position as gospel. There are very good reasons to be cheerful, but good news doesn't necessarily make interesting news, so bad news tends to crowd out good news, even if it is fake news. So whoever you're listening to, not all of these speakers are on our agenda today, but whoever you're listening to, from whatever side of the political spectrum, do not assume that what you're hearing is facts. More often than not, you will be presented with things which give a dimmer view of human prosperity and wealth than is really the case. So be wary is my advice to you today, but there are very good reasons also to be cheerful. Thanks very much for your time and attention.